like to thank everybody for coming here tonight. Now, all we got to do is put your arms out to the side, get 6 feet apart. Just kidding. We won't fit in here, will we? By the crowd, I'm assuming you know who our guest speaker is tonight. Yes. We're all happy and pleased to see Pat back here. It's been a while. I know, I just got a real quick little note here is, at our program committee, someone said, hey, we should have Pat come here and talk about Johnson County Supervisors. And I sent her an email and said, hey, would you like to come? And she said, you had me at hello. So that's how excited she was to come back to Oakville. So I'm not gonna, I could sit here and talk about 23 years of Pat, but I think we'll let her give the program tonight. So please welcome Pat Heiden.
I just have to take a breath first. It is really just wonderful to be back. So thank you all. It's just wonderful to be home. So and a pleasure to be here tonight. How's this sound? Is this better? Okay, just let me know. And I know you will. I definitely know you will. So.
If you walk away from that mic, no one at home will hear you.
Okay. So, again, yeah, Dave had me at hello. I couldn't get that email sent to him fast enough. So, I'm speaking about, Johnson County through the eyes of a supervisor, and but before we do that, I kind of need to set the stage about how I got here. Many of you will remember I first ran for county supervisor in 2016. It was a painful campaign in so many ways. We were constantly reacting instead of controlling our message and our own destiny. This headline, Heiden wears red dress with light blue overcoat. Ran in the Iowa City Press Citizen the Saturday before the Tuesday primary. It is obviously implying that I really was a Republican disguised as a Democrat. This mistruth and other lies dogged me throughout the campaign. I never thought there would be so much backstabbing, and learned quickly that the business of politics is lonely, messy, and sometimes downright ugly. Even so, that didn't stop me from launching another campaign. Fast forward to 2018. We learned from our mistakes and ran a well-oiled campaign. Running against two incumbents, it was critical that there were no missteps, and with a seasoned campaign manager in Sue Dvorsky, I won one of the two vacant seats in the primary and was the top vote getter in the November general election. I took office in January of 2019, and this year I serve as the chairperson of the Board of Supervisors. Okay. Oh, thank you. So first thing, I found the organization of the county both complicated and interesting. There are 10 elected officials, and this is hard for you to see, but we've got the county attorney, we've got the county auditor, the county recorder, the sheriff, the treasurer, and then the Board of Supervisors. And there are 5 supervisors. So those are the elected officials. We have absolutely no authority over one another, but definitely must learn how to work well together if we are going to accomplish anything. The Board of Supervisors is responsible for 12 departments. So you have ambulance, board office, finance, human resources, information technology, medical examiner, physical plant, seats, secondary roads, and social services. There's a couple more up there, but I couldn't read them. So, but there are 12. And then there are 3 boards which function independently. They are Conservation, the Board of Health, and the Commission of Veterans Affairs. The Board of Supervisors has no authority over these boards, but interestingly, the Board of Supervisors does appoint the members to each of these boards. One of the first things I learned when I took office was that I, as one supervisor, had absolutely no power at all. I needed to convince at least 2 other supervisors to agree with me on just about any issue or initiative. Then we have a quorum and hold all the power. That, too, poses some difficulty in that there can never be more than 2 supervisors in a room at one time. If so, in effect, that is a quorum, and a public meeting must be scheduled. I certainly can appreciate this for transparency and understand and support the process, but it does make conducting business cumbersome and at times government decision-making slow. So what events, projects, decisions have made the most significant impression on me in the 2.5 years I have been in office? I have a top 10 countdown to share with you. So here we go. Johnson County through the eyes of one supervisor. Starting with slide 10. The Children's Rodeo at the Johnson County Fair. 5 months into my term, we had community activists attend the board meetings to protest the county's grant award to the Ag Association, which oversees the fair. The activists showed pictures like these, passionately concerned about the abuse that allegedly takes place at these rodeos. They were calling for Johnson County not to award any funds to sponsor the fair event. Our stance is that the county grant funds awarded to the Ag Association are not going towards the rodeo, which actually is funded privately, not using taxpayer dollars, but is used specifically to keep parking and admission to the fair free for all. These funds also pay for other events and upkeep at the fairgrounds. These activists keep a close eye on the county funding award throughout the year and are vocal during the annual budget process. We also received many emails and phone calls from others in support of the Children's Rodeo. They shared their positive experiences in 4-H, and many reflected on growing up on Iowa farms. This is an example where so often there really are 2 sides to a story, and these groups were never going to agree on the possible benefits and/or harm resulting from participating and holding these events. At the end of the day, there just needs to be an acknowledgement that one will agree to disagree. So I saw my responsibility as a facilitator, hoping to find a solution and compromise that could satisfy both parties. The county fair begins later this month, I think actually next week, and I fully anticipate seeing the activists in the boardroom between now and then. This is the first time, again, I'm 5 months into my term. This is the first time, and I know not the last time, that I said to myself, now, why was it that I wanted to do this job, and what on earth was I thinking about? I'll tell you what, not nearly enough as I was getting paid here. The number 9 is special election. We were all very surprised when the former supervisor, Janelle Reddick, retired from the Board of Supervisors. She first took office in 29. She officially informed the auditor, the treasurer, and the recorder. You may ask, why those 3 elected officials instead of informing the Board of Supervisors? Well, because it is those 3, as defined in the Iowa Code, who must schedule a public meeting and decide if there will be a special election or an appointment who would serve the remainder of Janelle's term. As we know, those 3 elected officials decided by a vote of 2-1 to hold a special election at a cost of $80,000 to the county. This really was not surprising considering there was more than 1.5 years left on her term. Interestingly, in 29, Reddick was chosen from a field of more than a dozen to fill Larry Meyer's seat. He passed away that October. However, local conservatives challenged the appointment. The group collected enough signatures, largely from passersby on the Pinacrest, to petition the county to hold a special election, stating it was all about maintaining our right to vote. The special election was held in January of 2010. John Green won the most recent special election, replacing Reddick, and has been serving since mid-June. Number 8. Lulu Merle Johnson, as the county's new eponym. Interestingly, in 2017, there was an opinion piece in the Press Citizen advocating a name change for Johnson County. Public opinion was not favorable to this suggestion, so discussion stopped as quickly as it began. A short 3 years later, public opinion was much more favorable, especially in light of governments being committed to rectifying systematic racism and institutional inequity, including removing names and monuments that memorialize or honor a person who has perpetuated violence against Black people, Indigenous people, and other non-white people. The Board of Supervisors was ready to explore the possibilities, especially since Richard Mentor Johnson was the original namesake of Johnson County, and he was such a person. Richard Mentor Johnson was born and raised in Kentucky. He served as the 9th Vice President of the United States under President Martin Van Buren. He was a slave owner his entire life and credited himself for killing Shawnee Chief Tecumseh at the Battle of the Thames in 1805. The county was named after him by the Wisconsin Territorial Legislature in 1837, despite his lack of connection to the area. By the way, Iowa did not become a state until 1849. That's why Wisconsin got into the mix there. Obviously, changing the name of the county itself would cause so many problems for so many, but what about honoring a different Johnson? Interestingly, there was already a precedence for such a move. King County in the state of Washington, home to Seattle, was named for William Rufus King, vice president when the state of Washington was founded, and later an Alabama Confederate. In 1986, the King County Board of Supervisors kept the name King County, but renamed it for Martin Luther King. The Board of Supervisors decided to go in that direction and not change the county's name, but instead change its eponym. So what is an eponym? A person after whom a discovery, invention, or place is named. A committee was formed, led by Supervisor Green Douglas, and included Supervisor Porter, community members, and even 2 junior high students. Its recommendation was to name Lulu Merle Johnson as the county's new eponym. The Board of Supervisors enthusiastically approved that recommendation last month. Born in Iowa in 1907 to a father who had been born into slavery, Lulu was a student at the University of Iowa in 1925, one of only 14 Black women at the school at the time. By 1930, she went on to get her master's degree from the school and spent a decade teaching at the university while working towards her PhD, which she received in 1941. Lulu went on to lead a long career as an academic, teaching history and eventually becoming the Dean of Women at Cheyney University in Pennsylvania. Johnson County is the first county in Iowa named for a person of African American descent. It is only the 3rd of 5 Iowa counties, depending on who you are talking to, named for a woman. Bremer and Pocahontas counties are named for women, but there is some argument as to whether Louisa and Ida are named for women. So we may be only the 2nd county in the United States named for an African American. Number 7, summer of 2020 protests. The killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis served as a catalyst that sparked protests against racial injustice and police brutality throughout the country. So it's not surprising when a well-organized group calling themselves the Iowa Freedom Riders emerged to lead the protests here locally. Their focus was the city of Iowa City, with some protests in Coralville resulting in nightly curfews, and they were demanding policy changes immediately. The county in general, and the county sheriff in particular, kept a close watch over all the activities and monitored all information on social media concerning the protests. Iowa City Police and the Highway Patrol had control of the situation as the protests continued night after night, but the county certainly was on high alert if resources were needed. Johnson County Ambulance did deploy EMTs to the Pentecost each night so they would be available. On one of these nights, the protesters converged on the sheriff's office in the jail. The officers were ready for the standoff, and luckily there were no major altercations between the protesters and the police. The Freedom Riders did proceed to the courthouse, where they spray painted graffiti and then moved to the Health and Human Services building, where windows were broken. Arrests were made, but it was decided not to prosecute. On a couple of occasions, there was information received that the protesters were planning to surround the administration building on Dubuque Street. One night I got a call from emergency management director asking me to get to the administration building as quickly as possible, check for staff, locate the custodians, and get them out of the building. I found one custodian rushing from office to office, drawing the blinds, hoping to create a barrier that would help keep broken glass from falling inside the building. The mayor of Iowa City reached out to the city, county, and state elected officials, letting us know there was to be a rally that evening, and the Freedom Riders requested or demanded that we attend. There were 10 or more of us there that night. We all felt it was important we heard them out. We were asked to come to the stage, and leaders of the Freedom Riders asked how we were going to support the movement. It was a hot evening, and tempers were short. I was concerned about safety and what I thought were unrealistic demands from the Freedom Riders. Earlier in the year, we were concerned about this summer and what might transpire. The sheriff continues to monitor any and all activity. Number 6, the derecho. It was coined, as you probably know, by an Iowa State professor and means Midwest hurricane. The official definition is a long, fast-moving complex of thunderstorms with powerful straight-line winds that cause widespread destruction. I have no doubt about that because the devastation and aftermath I saw was simply unbelievable. It was August 10th, 2020. This derecho grew from a cluster of thunderstorms ranging from southeast South Dakota to Ohio. In its 14-hour span, it traveled 770 miles across the Midwest, hitting Iowa the hardest with wind speeds of 100+ miles per hour. In Cedar Rapids, it registered at 140 miles per hour, shattering its power grid. I remember that day well. We all remember that day. I actually was going home for lunch, listening to the local news on the car radio. Earlier in the morning, there was nothing of concern in the forecast, but now the DJs were talking about the strong winds that had swept through Marshalltown just north of Des Moines earlier that day and were moving east at a steady pace. They anticipated the storm would reach the Iowa City area within a half an hour. With Chairperson Rod Sullivan out of town, I was in charge and decided I really needed to be at work when it hit, and immediately turned around and headed back to the administration building. I remembered the ominous cloud formation as I was approaching the building and hurried inside. All staff proceeded to the various storm shelters in the buildings. I did what no one is supposed to do. I watched the entire storm from my second-floor office window. And I had company up there, too. Emergency management was already activated because of the pandemic, but shifted focus quickly for the next few weeks, helping the towns in Johnson County with cleanup and providing supplies, food, ice, water to those who needed it. 26,000 Johnson County households lost power. Actually, Johnson County hotels filled up quickly as area residents and others from other neighboring counties scrambled to find lodging. Towns also identified temporary locations for residents to bring debris. Downed power lines slowed efforts considerably to clear streets and county roads. Towns like Swisher were providing free bottled water to its residents and opened their libraries, which still had power and working internet connections, so residents could charge their phones and let loved ones elsewhere know that they were safe and okay. Conservation helped and spent a lot of time cleaning trails and parks, which saw a lot of damage. Campers at Kent Park huddled together in storm-proof shelters only to find themselves unable to leave the park after the storm because of downed trees covering the roads, making them impassable. I remember driving home that night and could not believe my eyes in the amount of devastation. Cleanup is still continuing today. This was the most costly thunderstorm in U.S. history so far, at more than $7.5 billion. The cost to Johnson County was $6.1 million. By the way, this was not the first derecho to hit Johnson County. On June 29, 1998, one ripped through the county with 80 to 100 mile an hour winds, and that lasted for about 20 minutes. Number 5, American Rescue Plan Act. President Biden signed this act into law on March 11, 2021. It's a $1.9 trillion economic stimulus bill. A sizable portion of this fund is intended to provide support to local governments in responding to the impacts of COVID-19 in their communities. Johnson County will receive $29.3 million. Actually, one half has already been received and in the bank, with the remainder expected May of 2022. By December of 2024, the ARPA funds must be obligated with all the funds spent by December of 2026. States, cities, school districts, and others will also receive funding. This is an aggressive plan to help recover from the pandemic and the economic recession that followed, and these funds have very specific allowable uses. They are to be used to respond to public health emergency or its negative economic impacts, to workers performing essential work during the COVID-19 public health emergency by providing premium pay to eligible workers, to reimburse local governments for lost revenue due to COVID-19. And actually, the Johnson County, the lost revenue was about $900,000 compared to the city of Iowa City, which was about $8 million. Parking fees, and also the city of Iowa City supplies utilities to the University of Iowa, including water, and of course the university shut down, and it was significant to their bottom line. So less than $1 million for the county, but significantly for county cities. And finally, another requirement to make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. Johnson County is taking a three-pronged approach, which is to stabilize our community, strategize together to invest in future prosperity, organize our resources to ensure inclusive recovery. We have been working hard to create structure, procedures, and processes to develop mechanisms for consistent communication and equitable feedback. A leadership team for which I am a part has been in place and meeting weekly since February to work through all of this. Not surprisingly, we have been receiving much public comment on how the funds should be spent. We have had feedback from some groups who want the entire amount awarded to essential workers. For a week, that ad ran in the local newspapers. This one right here, and again, you can't see it, but it was more than half a page. And it says, call these two elected officials. Johnson County Supervisor Chair Pat Heiden and my cell phone number, and Iowa City Mayor Bruce Teague and his cell phone number. And so you can imagine we were in, it was quite amazing, hundreds of calls. So quite interesting on that. So, but it is critical that we receive public input, and we have planned 8 to 10 public listening sessions throughout the county. Surveys will be available at the Johnson County Fair, and we are coordinating with the auditor's office to have this on their mock ballot, which is so popular with the fairgoers. We will also be collaborating with the City of Iowa City, and we'll be sharing survey data and planning a joint public input session and meeting with smaller cities and unincorporated areas of the county. There's also a link on our website for the public to fill out a survey. To date, we have received about 600 responses, and the breakdown is as follows. First, address negative economic impacts. Second, offer premium pay for essential workers. Third, broadband infrastructure. Fourth, support public health response to COVID-19. Fifth, water and sewer infrastructure. We all agree this is not a short-term stimulus package, but a real opportunity to make a long-term and significant difference in our county. We are aware of the huge responsibility of all of this and know we have one opportunity to get it right, and I'm proud to have a leadership role in all of this. Number 4, what is a farm in Johnson County? In Johnson County prior to 2019, there was a 40-acre rule which was established in 1980. It defined a farm by size, not by farming activities. To be considered a farm, the property needed to consist of at least 40 acres to receive important ag exemptions from county zoning for their land, barns, and farmhouses. So what exactly does that exemption mean to the farmer? One can build a family residence and even a second home on the property without a building permit or county inspections. One can also build outbuildings like barns and sheds and be exempt from county regulations. This all saves time and money, something farmers don't have, especially small farmers whose acreage is not nearly that large, and thus these small farmers, were excluded from the 40-acre rule and thus not entitled to the ag exemption. So why doesn't the small farmer just purchase 40 acres? Most small farmers can't find 40 acres. Actually, in each of the last 10 years, beginning farmers have identified the biggest barrier is access to land. This shouldn't be a surprise, since 56% of Iowa farmland is owned by those 65 years and older. 30% of the farmland is owned by those 75 years or older, and 29% of the Iowa farmland is primarily owned for family and or sentimental reasons. What does this all mean? Simply that the land is not turning over. Another barrier, if the small farmer could find land, they most likely could not afford it. In 2020, Johnson County farmland was valued at $8,864 per acre, or more than $350,000 for 40 acres. And finally, even more importantly, the small farmer doesn't want that big of an operation, confident they can make a healthy and sustainable living off far less land than 40 acres. The Board of Supervisors has embraced the small farmer, and one of its county initiatives has been to support the local foods movement and help the small farmer prosper in Johnson County. This resulted in the creation of the Food Policy Council in 2012. This council, since its creation, has recommended to the Board of Supervisors to level the playing field and offer ag exemption to the small farmer. I had the opportunity to sit on this council for 2 years as a supervisor liaison, and it was surprising to me to learn that we import the majority of the food citizens consume here in Iowa. The farmers growing food for our communities are primarily located outside the county. We must support a more community-based food system, one that enhances our economic, environmental, and public health. We need more local farmers growing food for those living right here and for our growing population. And to do that, the county needed to do more than talk the talk. It needed to walk the walk by supporting small farmers and encouraging new farmers by offering the ag exemption to those farming less than 40 acres and acknowledge and embrace farmers of all types and sizes, from livestock farmers to row crop farmers to vegetable farmers. I am proud that the Board of Supervisors did just that. With a 3-2 vote in December of 2019, the board approved the Unified Development Ordinance, which included a section and the process to grant farmers with less than 40 acres the right to ag exemption. Number 3, the MRAP. Last month, this MRAP, and that's an actual picture of it, this MRAP was in the news again. This vehicle was borrowed from Johnson County by the Iowa City Police so they could serve a warrant to a resident residing on the southeast side of Iowa City. But I'm getting ahead of the story. In 2014, the Johnson County Sheriff's Department received a mine-resistant, ambush-protected, six-wheel drive armored truck from the Department of Defense through the 1033 program, which allows for excess or surplus Department of Defense property to be transferred to local law enforcement agencies. The only expense to law enforcement agencies was transportation and any modifications. In Johnson County's case, the vehicle was painted black with emergency vehicle lights and radio equipment installed at a total cost of $13,000. This was paid out of drug forfeiture money, so no tax dollars were used. Maintenance costs since 2014 total approximately $4,000 and an annual liability insurance premium of $1,100 per month. Since 2014, the MRAP has been deployed 19 times, with 16 of those for shootings, homicides, or other firearms-related investigations. Each time this is used, there is public outcry that this isn't a military state. It's frightening and erodes public trust in law enforcement. I get it. I really, really get it. At a recent work session, I said, it's a big, big vehicle, and I can't imagine looking at something like that coming down my neighborhood street. Just imagine that coming down George Street. And that's the argument. It rolls down neighborhood streets of those less fortunate than I. At that same work session, one citizen who was visibly upset pointed to the list of neighborhoods where it had been deployed, claiming there weren't any white neighborhoods on the list. Sheriff Kunkel said what keeps him up at night is making sure his deputies have everything they need so they can go home at night. And this vehicle, which he describes as a big bulletproof vest for moving people around, is another tool to help ensure that his officers do just that. I certainly don't know what the answer is, but what I do know is that the unfortunate reality that gun violence is on the rise right here in Johnson County, so much so that it is becoming our new normal, with reporting of these incidents located on the back pages of the local newspaper. A short few years ago, those incidents would have been front page news. People are acquiring guns that are far superior to those available to the sheriff and his deputies. And as of July 1, Iowans no longer need a permit or to purchase and carry handguns. What alternatives do the police have to protect themselves and others in a dangerous situation? The supervisors have directed the sheriff to look into the purchase of a Bearcat similar to what is used in Lynn County. It would serve the same purpose but not look as menacing. Also discussed as an option was armored doors on the deputy vehicles. We also need better record keeping and specific policies and procedures in place as to when and how the MRAP will be used if the decision is made to keep it. I don't have the answers other than I know that this discussion is far, far from over. Number 2, GuideLink Center. This dream started long before I became supervisor. Actually, it started in 2010 when community services agencies and other stakeholders began meeting to improve coordination of the systems of care in Johnson County. These stakeholders included Johnson County, Iowa City, Coralville, North Liberty, local not-for-profits, the University of Iowa College of Nursing, and the Department of Emergency Medicine at UIHC. It truly was a joint venture. The goal? To keep people with mental health and/or substance abuse issues out of jail or hospital emergency rooms and redirect them to more appropriate services such as crisis intervention and observation and stabilization, detox, and sobering unit. The low barrier shelter will also be housed there during the winter months. In 2018, the dream came one step closer to reality with the purchase of 5.34 acres of land on Southgate Avenue in Iowa City for a cost of $1.35 million. That location was appealing because it is close to the Community Crisis Center, the Shelter House, and Prelude. These agencies were anticipated to be key players in providing services once the center was opened and operating. That same year, 2018, a project manager was hired. He actually was loaned to the county from UIHC and led this project to successful completion within budget and only 30 days behind schedule, which was pretty amazing considering the pandemic and the derecho, which pulled a number of subcontractors away to more urgent matters. The soft opening was February this year. The data collected so far is revealing. As of 6/30 of 2021, 184 individuals were admitted. 54 individuals were brought to the center by law enforcement. 73 were referred by mobile crisis, 11 by hospitals, 13 by healthcare providers, and 33 were walk-ins. What does this tell us? The sick get care immediately. Officers drop them off and are back in the streets providing public safety instead of spending hours in the emergency rooms as escorts, and Johnson County is saving money because of reduced overflow at the county jail. I am a huge supporter of the GuideLink Center and its mission, and as a supervisor, I am committed to ensuring its success going forward. Number one, COVID-19, the pandemic. It seems like just yesterday when we first heard of COVID-19. We all were paying such close attention to the news around the country and the world, hoping against all hope that we could keep this virus at a distance. Then we got word of a Hills Bank trip to Egypt and some of those returning testing positive for the virus. While all this was unfolding, it was business as usual at Johnson County until it wasn't. March 17th, 2020, St. Patrick's Day, the administration and Health and Human Services buildings and the courthouse closed to the public. Knowing these closures were coming, conversations had already begun about continuity of government. We were determining what systems needed to be implemented and in place so Johnson County government could continue its essential operations and functions in what was quickly becoming a pandemic in our new normal. Department heads and elected officials, with the guidance of human resources, determined who were the essential workers in their respective departments, and all other staff were sent home to work remotely. Workforce at the Johnson County buildings was immediately reduced by 75%. In the Board of Supervisors office, it was decided that Rod Sullivan and I, as the chair and vice chair, would continue to report to work every day. The original plan was for the other supervisors to transition in and out every few weeks. All the supervisors were very willing to do this, but it worked out that for the next 13 months, Rod and I oversaw the Board of Supervisor business in person, while the other supervisors worked remotely and did phone in for the weekly board meetings. Very early on, I received a call from Dave Wilson, Director of Emergency Management, who asked me to put together a list of all retirement, assisted living, and nursing home communities in the county. Because of my background, he said I was the ideal person to do this. And I must say, at that point, having served just over a year as supervisor and still trying to get comfortable in my new role, I thought, finally, someone has asked me to do something I know how to do. He planned to set up a daily call with these communities to check on PPE, supplies, staffing, residents, positive tests, and anything else that arose. I was on that daily call with the 16 communities, including Oak Knoll, for more than 100 days, every day. And every community was doing all they could to keep residents and staff safe. Some were more prepared, some had more seasoned leadership, and some maybe were a little luckier than others, but every single one is my hero. Emergency management also set up a daily call for all the stakeholders in Johnson County. That included all the cities in the county, all the police departments, the hospitals, the school districts. This daily call, too, went on for months and months. At the county level, we established a building entry task force that met every 2 weeks, and the electeds began a weekly call-in just to check in with each other. That call continues today. So the buildings are closed, staffing is in place, important committees formed, and daily calls established. Now, how were we to conduct daily government business? Mail drop boxes for each office were installed at the front entrance of the administration building so the public could drop off any paperwork that needed to be processed. This worked well for a while, but the volume of transactions daily were hard to manage. We continued to encourage the use of drop boxes, telephone calls, and emails, but also went to an appointment system. Offices were literally conducting government business in the parking lots and at the building entrances. Not surprisingly, we realized relatively quickly that this was ineffective, inefficient, and unsafe. So once again, we pivoted and decided to allow the public to enter the administration building. The doors would remain locked, but seats drivers who were furloughed because ridership came to an immediate halt, they would manage the entrance in the public. Large red dots were strategically placed on the floors for social distancing. Plexiglass was installed at all the counters. Desks were repositioned to guarantee social distancing, and masks were required. Speaking of masks, every decision we made was based on the expertise, guidance, and direction of the experts at Public Health and UIHC, including mask wearing. Early on, the Board of Supervisors sent a letter to the governor urging her to issue a state mask mandate. And if she wasn't willing to do this, we urged her to give us the authority as a county to do so locally. We heard nothing from her other than thanking us for the correspondence. We had numerous conversations with the county attorney about what our options were. Doing it ourselves would be defying the governor's emergency order, and we would have no authority to enforce. But the Johnson County Board of Health had the authority to do so, and the county attorney recommended we work through this board. It was August of 2020 when the Board of Health held a special meeting and approved a mask mandate ordinance. This was sent to the Board of Supervisors for approval, and we took immediate action. This stayed in effect until May 31st of 2021. The staff returned to county buildings in April of this year, and the buildings opened to the public June 1st of 2021. One big event in the middle of all of this was the general election in November of 2020. The auditor's office was so creative as they launched a drive-through voting. Cars would drive through the lower level of the parking ramp at the administration building. 2 sheds were purchased and equipped with heating and electricity so poll workers could stay warm and process ballots. It was a huge success with record turnout. And FYI, we have stored these sheds for possible future use. Yes, March 2020 does seem like just yesterday, but it turns out yesterday was a very, very, very long day. So that's Johnson County through the eyes of this supervisor. The work is so varied and so often unpredictable. I hope by sharing my top 10 it gives you just a little glimpse of what my life is like now. So thank you all for being here, and it's absolutely been a pleasure to be with you. Any questions, or should we just go for the refreshments? Yes.
Pat, nothing controversial. I represent, I'm sure, a lot of people when I say thank you for serving.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, thank you for supporting me, you know, in this journey. It's, you know, you're all in my heart, so thank you. Thank you. Yes?
When you said that you couldn't have more than 2 people meeting together, otherwise it would have to be a public meeting, so can you say something then about how decisions get made when I mean, is there a lot of individual going around to offices or what? In other words, if you can't all five be together, then how do you get things done?
We do that at the public meeting, the boardroom. And the question was, so do you go, from office to office and try and work that? And that's called rotating meetings. So that is not allowed either.
That's not allowed.
It's not allowed. So the intent is that transparency and that, we are working through, our decisions at that public meeting. We have a work session every Wednesday morning. And then Thursday morning is the formal session where we approve, various items. But, right, so it is very controlled that way, and so that we adhere to Iowa code and the public meetings. Yeah. And that was probably one of the hardest things for me to get used to, because here at Oak Knoll, I was surrounded with, exceptional people, and that team, we figured things out and worked together any issues we had behind closed doors, and, then we were all ready and in sync in anything that we did here at Oak Knoll. And so, it feels like some dirty laundry, hanging, and it makes it, so that was one of the hardest things for me to navigate and get used to, and how we move business along and come to consensus and be respectful and good listeners and supporting one another. Yeah. Anything else? Yes.
Do you see any spillover to Johnson County from Jasper County's Board of Supervisors just this week saying that they're a sanctuary city for Second Amendment? Do you see any spillover into other counties throughout the state?
I knock on wood, it's so unpredictable. I certainly not Johnson County, I don't think. And I actually think that that's going to be an agenda item next week, just to have a discussion about that. And there was some discussion today, but it's the jury is out right now. But I'm hopeful that there won't be any spillover.
Could you explain what she's asking?
Andrew, you want to go ahead and?
I probably won't give it accurately, but
Jasper County, which is where Newton is, to give you an idea, the Board of Supervisors just, I think this week, declared and voted that they are a Second Amendment sanctuary, by which they have the right to do whatever they want with their guns without having interference from state and federal, I think even local officials. So it's essentially, I can shoot you if I want to, and you're not going to do anything about it.
Yeah. And, as I mentioned, as far as the Iowa legislature, July 1st, no permitting needed for purchase or handling of handguns. So it's concerning. It's very concerning. Yes.
You mentioned, if I understand correctly, that the Board of Supervisors is in charge of Johnson County Fair?
No.
Oh,
No.
I just wondered the relationship of the board, of the Fair Board and the
Yeah.
Johnson County.
The Johnson County Board of Supervisors grants a number of awards to not-for-profits, and the Ag Association, the Agricultural Association, oversees the fair. And so that's one of the grantees that I think it's just been going on forever and ever. And so with the children's rodeo and the concern about the abuse of the animals, the activists did not want any taxpayer money or county money going to support the children's rodeo. And that's privately funded. There are other events that go on out there. And again, for Johnson County, the Board of Supervisors have been committed for years to keep the fair parking free and no admission, so that anyone and everyone who would like to participate and come can do that. Yeah. So it's one of the many grants that we provide to not-for-profits. Mm-hmm. Anything else? Yes.
When you first ran, you ran as a Republican.
No, see, there you go again. There you go again. No, I did not.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, that's right.
What I was remembering was John trying to convince you to change parties.
Yes, John Dane was, trying, in my office here, trying to convince me to switch to Republican. No, yeah, I was running as a Democrat, but as I said, that just, plagued me all along, and it was hard to get out from under that. And again, you think about a headline like that, and the the article was really a half a page above the fold line, and it was a Saturday before the Tuesday primary. So it was one of those campaigns that there was nothing that aligned, and we just needed to get through it and go forward.
Did you get rid of the Red Cross?
I got rid of anything red I have, so you will find nothing red in my closet. And I think, part of it too is I was very naive. My mom was, and you know the story. She was a county supervisor in Western Iowa, Crawford County, when I was growing up. And she also ran against Steve King when he ran for state senate. So, I thought I got that. And, but really I was on the outside looking in, as she was navigating all of that. And, I really needed the party behind me, and you've got to put work in, man, and you've got to go to the central committee meetings, and you need to participate and do all those things. And so that was just another huge learning curve for me, and I put in my time and worked really hard to get to a point where, we could launch that second campaign. I just can't tell you what a pleasure this has been. So, thank you.
Thank you, Pat. And we do have refreshments in the back. It's the first time we've had refreshments in a year and a half. So,